All right, everybody, I'm back to answer more of your questions, and I am going to be able to get more videos out this week. Thank goodness. I ended up getting really busy last week and didn't get around to it. But let's just hop right in because I have quite a few asks and then some other things I want to talk about too. So we're going to see how much I can squeeze in this week. All right. So here's the first one. I was rewatching the entire show, good for you, and Sasha's death episode kind of crushed the theme credits theory because the theme played at the end of the episode. Yeah, I haven't talked about the theme music for a long time. I actually do have a post on this, and I will link it in the notes down below, but yeah. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with this, there was a theory for a long time that any of the main characters, so it would have to be someone who's the actor's name was in the credits, the opening credits. Okay, so it's not a side character, not like the ones who are only there and gone after a minute because they're Walker Chow, you know, not the small characters, but the big characters whose names are in the opening credits. When they die, almost all of them would get silence after their death episode. And it was a big deal because the main theme song still played at the end of Coda. And so we saw that as, okay, then she can't really be dead because the theme music played, right? And usually the characters who die, who are in the main opening credits, get silence. But you're right that it does not hold true across the board. So that's just an example of that particular theory didn't really pan out. Now, it's still something that's really, really interesting to analyze, though. I have a whole post about it. Like I said, I will link it. It's in my master post, but it's also pretty old. So I kind of had to laugh because I wanted to go look at it and kind of refamiliarize myself with some of the different exceptions and things. And most of my master posts are so old, you guys. Like, they're from like season 8. So most of them are not updated, and we know a lot more, and I really should go through and update them. But anyway, you're right that after Sasha died, and yes, Sasha really did die. She really did leave the show. She's on a Star Trek show now, right? But the music played for her. On the other hand, there were other exceptions, but for the most part, they didn't bother me at first. So when Merle died, and his name was in the opening credits at that point. Most people don't realize that because he was a side character. It certainly wasn't always there, but they did put Michael Rooker in the opening credits, right, kind of in the back half of season 3, but right before Merle was killed. So he really should have gotten silence, and he didn't. But the reason that didn't bother me originally was because that was before Gimple had taken over, and so Gimple wasn't always in charge of things like that. And then there was Andrea. She did not get silence. She did not get the main theme song either. So she was a little bit of a, kind of in her own category, because they had very sad music that played at the end of her death episode, which was the finale of season 3. So it's true that she didn't get the theme song, and she did sort of fit the pattern in that way, but she also didn't get silence. So it's somewhere in between. But we also know that Gimple completely redid that episode because that was when he took over. We always say season 4 is when he took over for real. Technically, he was put in charge at the very end of season 3, and they completely reshot Andrea's death scene because apparently it was terrible. So really, it was 316 that he took over, not 401, even though we tend to say it's season 4 that he took over. Anyway, but the thing that really started to make me realize that we weren't 100% right about that was actually 701. So remember that at the end of season 6 is when Negan killed his first victim. We didn't know who it was. It just went to black, and everyone was guessing over the summer who the victim would be. It turned out to be Abraham. He was the first victim, right? And it's also true that there was no theme music at the end of that episode, at the end of 616. However, then 701 shows up, and the thing is, we had a second death in 701, and if you look really closely at the chronology of it, we get Negan's first victim at the end of season 6, right, which was Abraham. We didn't hear that there was more than one victim, and then, of course, if you watch that, he kills Abraham, and then there's some talk, and there's a little bit of space before he kills Glenn. So Glenn technically died in 701, not 616, which means we should have had 0, if the theory was correct, we should have had 0 theme music at the end of 701, and we actually heard the theme music. And I know that there are people who, thought that was disrespectful to Glenn's character, and why was he not as big as Abraham, but you guys, that's not a thing. It's just that we're wrong about the reason why they don't do the theme music, okay? We're wrong about that. So you can go through and read my theory. I kind of go back and forth about how me and the Glorious Collector lady were talking about it, and she said something about how maybe the theme music wasn't so much about physical death, but about the character's influence over the story is still going to be there. And that's actually really interesting because in a lot of, probably not all, but in a lot of the cases, we end up seeing that character again, but usually in flashback. So when Sasha died, we heard the theme music, but we do see her in flashback again, and she still is having a lot of influence over the story, especially over Rick. You know, she was the one he talked to in his hallucination in 905, so it's just kind of interesting. And of course, Beth still has a lot of influence over Daryl. I mean, they've practically admitted that, especially for the first few seasons after Coda. Okay, but I actually do think that the theme music is about more than even that. I think that it's about the end of an arc, like a character arc, only it's for the whole group. So what we've started paying attention to are sunrises. They almost always have a sunrise scene when they're starting a new arc, and it's very subtle. They don't draw a whole lot of attention to it. But more of the pattern that I'm noticing is that something big happens, okay? It's very often a character death or something big that happens and a character death goes along with it, right? And we don't have the music. And then the next episode, we have something that happens while the sun is rising. And I think that's the way that they are showing this is the end of one arc and we're now starting a new arc. And so I would argue that when Beth died, or, you know, supposedly died in Coda when she was shot, that was not the end of the arc. Even though it felt like it was, and of course that was the end of the first half of the season. So they're a little bit deceptive in how they do things. You would think that the logical thing to do would be to do an arc for 8 episodes at a time, since the series logistically is broken up that way. First 8, and then there's a break, and then second 8, or at least that's how the flagship show always was. But that's not always the way they do it. We often see the end of the arc like 2 episodes into the back half of the season, and then we see the sunrise. Or in the case of 701, right? Negan killing Abraham, that was the end of the arc, and we were going to be starting something new because it was Negan arriving, okay? So the limited piece that they had found at Alexandria up to that time was done. It was over. And now Negan's arriving, and we're going to have the whole Negan arc, which went through seasons 7 and 8, right? And then you can see them closing that arc and starting a new one, but really the arc didn't completely close until Rick disappeared. So you can see that they don't keep it at 8 episodes. They move it around. So that's just what I would argue. And I'm not sure when. I'm pretty sure someone figured it out, and it might even be in my meta. I didn't read the entire thing over again. But I do go into some of the arcs. So we have like the farm arc, the full Shane arc, the prison arc. I mean, these are just different things. And I kind of show how when they start and when they end. We have happy community at the prison / Rick being a farmer, but of course that ends, mid-season 4. And the thing is, sometimes the arcs do line up with the end of the 8th episode. So a really good one is actually that. The happy prison arc really ended in 408 when the prison went down and Herschel died. And we didn't have any theme music at the end of that. So everyone, that was like lending credence to the idea that it was Herschel that died, and so we didn't have music. But really, we didn't have music not because Herschel died, but because it was the end of the arc, but his death coincided with the end of the arc. So you see what I mean? It's a little bit complicated, but I think it's the arc that determines whether the music will play or not. And then you got to look for a sunrise in the next episode or 2, or whenever they, officially start the next arc. So I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So you're right that Sasha's death definitely was one thing that showed us that, because the music still played even though she died, and obviously she was a huge character. But that was not the end of the arc. The end of the arc would have been, I think, more like the beginning of All Out War. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, and if you want in more detail, just go down in the show notes and I will link to that old post of mine and you can read it in more detail. Okay. All right, next one. I was wondering, after Beth was shot, how could they have filmed the scene where there is a big herd and the scene where they left Beth's body in a car without being seen? Especially during season 5, the Spoiling Dead fans was very active. They always had people on filming locations, and even if there are scenes that were filmed that were never seen in the show, White Houses, etc., they were filming inside. How could they have made the scene of Beth being left? All right, so I'll start by saying we don't know for sure what the answer to this is because there are actually many possibilities, so I can't zero in on just one. First of all, I do believe they were seen filming at least parts of it, but they were behind a wall. So even though people could see those, the white cabin and everything, the church part with the church with the white steeple where they, I believe, tried to bury her and have her funeral, that was not seen except for the steeple because they had built a wall around it. So people could see the steeple of the church up above the wall because it would have had to be like a 30-foot tall wall, in order to hide the steeple. And they couldn't see what was going on behind it, but they reported on that. The Spoiling Dead fans did report on that because they were clearly filming there, and it was at night. And the reason they knew they were filming there is because there were lights, there was a lot of people walking around. So it's one of those things where, you know how you can be like in your neighborhood and you can be out at night and you know that something's going on like 1 or 2 streets over because you can see car lights and you can see people and hear them talking, but because the houses are in the way, you can't really clearly see what's going on. It was kind of like that. Like they could see people, they could see equipment, things like microphones and booms and filming apparatuses and things like that. But because of the wall, they couldn't actually see what was going on. They didn't know what was being filmed. And I believe that was the white church scene. Which means they might have had walkers come through in that scene and they just couldn't see them because of the wall. Now, would they have been all 800 walkers that were supposedly filming for that episode? I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, it's just, part of it is just movie magic too. I think they could have filmed this kind of separately. Like they could have filmed the 800 walkers moving around the city without any of the actors and then filmed something where they really only needed a handful of walkers, and then they could just kind of overlay it and make it look a certain way. So there's a lot of different possibilities. Also keep in mind that the AMC lot is huge. I mean, people a lot of times were not taking this into account. One thing that I actually like to point out is in Always Accountable, when Daryl first meets Dwight and Sherry and they're out in the woods. Yes, that is out in the woods and they're pretty deep out in the woods, okay? But all of that was filmed on the AMC lot and nobody saw it ever. Nobody had any idea about that scene until we got a glimpse of it in the trailer for season 6. And that's because the AMC lot was like acres and acres and acres of woods. So they could film anywhere out there and the cameras truly could not see them. Okay, so the spoilers always got things that were filmed on built sets, like Alexandria set or the prison set, things like that. But some of those other ones, not so much. And the other thing is, I don't know, we just don't know exactly what the story is. Everyone's assuming, I think you just got to keep in mind kind of the logic of it. Because I've fallen into this trap before myself. We're kind of assuming that there were 800 walkers that came through Atlanta and they had to leave her in a car there. But I don't think they left her in a car in Atlanta. The 800 walkers might have come through Atlanta. We don't really know, again, because we don't know the story. But if they went to this church and tried to bury her, it may have been a more rural setting outside the city where they actually left her. And so those walkers could have come through the woods and not through the city. You see what I mean? Especially because of Father Gabriel's church. In Coda, we have he goes out through the floor, accidentally leads the walkers from the school back to his church and they overrun the church, right? I 1000% believe that is a foreshadow of what happened at Beth's church when they were trying to bury her. And of course, there's no way to know that because they foreshadowed something that we still have not seen yet. It's part of the missing 17 days, right? So at the time, it just felt like this really random occurrence. Like, why are they showing us this? Like, we're more interested in what's going on at Grady. Why did they have this in Coda? It's a foreshadowing of stuff that we haven't actually seen, that we didn't actually see, right? So anyway, just keep that in mind. The walkers may have come through the woods. It may be a more rural setting. The church stuff was filmed at night, which makes it harder to see. It was also filmed behind a wall. And then, of course, there's movie magic. I mean, it could be that when we see that scene, it will actually be during the day, and the walkers will actually, in the show, be coming through Atlanta or something, but that doesn't mean they had to film it that way. There is movie magic. There is technology, and they can film it one way and then put like filters to make it look like a different kind of time of day. And they can have walkers coming from one place and overlay that over something else. So that the actors who are filming this scene at the church maybe didn't film at the same time as this walker horde, and they just kind of put the two together. I mean, there's just so many possibilities for how they might have done it. But I guess my point is that just because we didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't done. Same as all the other scenes that they never captured. I mean, people always say, well, yeah, but the reason they didn't know about Ezekiel is because he was filming in studio. Okay, that's true. He was never filming on the Alexandria set or anything. But again, they have those acres and acres of woods, and there are tons of stuff in the various seasons that were filmed that no spoiler camera ever caught. And we didn't know about it until we saw it in the show. So just keep that in mind. I'm not worried about it because nobody ever caught the filming. I mean, I would argue they did catch the filming at the church. We just couldn't see it because of the wall. But the fact that we didn't actually see 800 Walker extras in conjunction with that wall or that church, that doesn't bother me because there's so many ways that they could have put it together, and we don't know the entire story. Maybe they were never actually in the same place as the Horde and they just saw it coming and knew they had to leave because they were in its path. It might have been two completely separate locations. So anyway, I hope that helps. That was kind of a ramble, but there's just a lot of ways they could have done it, and I've never been very swayed by people saying, oh, well, this actor hasn't been seen on set, or, oh, we didn't see that, so that can't be the case, because so often, just because we didn't see it doesn't mean it's not the case. And we have example after example after example of things that were filmed, even outside, that were never caught on camera. So I wouldn't worry about that. Okay, let's stop there for today, and I will be back with more tomorrow. Bye.